welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Ceci and today I'm going to be doing a week in the life of a baker. I run a cake decorating studio and a home bakery full-time, and this is just a little glimpse of what a typical week looks like for me. So on this week I had a few orders during the week. So Monday morning I had to take out a cake and cookie order. Then I got started on making some chocolate chip, white macadamia, and birthday cake cookies. Honestly, cookies are my favorite thing to bake just because the whole process is just so relaxing for me. I like to prep these earlier in the week and then freeze them, and then once I'm ready to bake, I just thaw them out a little bit and bake them. I find that freezing them really affects the texture of the cookies. It helps them not spread so much, and it also makes baking day a lot easier. I always like to have some cookies prepped in the freezer just in case I get a last minute order, or if I need some cookies for an event, I just take them out, thaw them out for about an hour or so, and then pop them in the oven, and they come out so good. If you've never tried this hack, even if you don't bake for profit, if you bake for fun, make a batch of cookies, roll them into balls just like I'm doing, then line them on a cookie sheet with parchment paper, then put some plastic wrap over them and let them harden up in the freezer for about an hour or so. Once the cookies have hardened, you want to put them in a freezer-safe gallon Ziploc bag. Then whenever you get that craving for a cookie, just take however many cookies out that you want, put them on a cookie pan, and then let them thaw out for about an hour, and then pop them into the oven, and they will be so good, just like you made them that same day. So the cookies that I'm making right now is the confetti or the birthday cake cookies. So it's just a mixture of sprinkles and some white chocolate chips. And then I leave an indentation in the middle because I like to put some marshmallow fluff in the middle right before I'm gonna bake. I don't freeze the marshmallow with the cookies, but I put it on fresh right before I'm about to bake. Next, I'm making the chocolate chip cookies. So this chocolate chip cookie recipe is my very own recipe. It took me so many years to get the perfect chocolate chip cookie down. So I wanted something that was like crispy on the outside but soft in the middle and not too bulky, like not those huge cookies either. Like I didn't want like a New York style cookie, and I didn't want like a super flat cookie like the Tate's cookies, but I wanted something right in the middle and with that perfect bite. So next I'm working on a strawberry cake. Now this strawberry cake does have fresh strawberries. It's not like your traditional strawberry cake where it's like pink, but I do like to put some fresh strawberries in there, and it is just such a good cake. I like to pair this cake with a white chocolate frosting just because I feel like that's a very well-known combination. And on the next day is when I actually started to decorate it. So I'm just going to be making my buttercream recipe. And to make this recipe white chocolate, I just melted a little bit of a white chocolate bar, and then I just added it to my mixture once it cooled down a little bit. If you're ever adding anything additional to your buttercream to flavor it up, make sure it's at the same temperature as the buttercream, or at least at room temperature, because let's say if I were to add the white chocolate while it was piping hot, my buttercream would be a disaster. It would be like melty, grainy. I'm also adding a little bit of the melted white chocolate to a piping bag. That way I can also use this for my strawberries that I'm going to be decorating the cake with on top. Then I'm going to be stacking and decorating my strawberry cake. So I like to wrap my cakes after I'm done baking them because it locks in a lot of the moisture. And then I also like to freeze my cakes before I start decorating. So I freeze them for at least 4 hours. That way they can be a lot easier to work with. So if you notice my cake isn't like moving all over the place. Freezing your cakes ahead of time also helps a lot with cake crumbs. So if you've ever tried to decorate a freshly baked cake, you'll know what I'm talking about. So there's a bunch of crumbs everywhere, right? Your cake's falling apart completely. So freezing your cakes ahead of time helps with those two things. And then I'm just doing a little bit of piping on top of the cake. I always think piping is just so relaxing to watch and satisfying. Like just look at those fluffy swirls. So beautiful. And so I'm gonna make 3 more little swirls. So I'm gonna put my strawberries on top, and then after I put them on top is when I actually drizzle them with white chocolate. I find this step a lot easier rather than covering the strawberries with chocolate first and then letting them, chill out in the fridge and then putting them back on the cake. And then by that time, my buttercream swirls have hardened. So this just makes the process a lot easier. Then I'm just gonna write happy birthday on the cake board. Writing on your cake board or on your cakes, or just like writing with buttercream in general, is hard. Okay, so if you're starting to bake and you cannot get the writing down, trust me, it took me about 10 years and sometimes it's still not perfect. What I did to practice my buttercream writing was I used a parchment paper and I would print out some like little like templates, some letter templates. Honestly, kind of like a child when they're learning how to write, but I would put that printed letter sheet behind my parchment paper and then just fill a piping bag with buttercream and just practice. Then I got started on the cakes that we need for the cake decorating class that weekend. So that weekend we had a Valentine's Day themed cake class. So we decorated some heart cakes and it was a lot of fun. But I'm just baking up the vanilla cakes for that week. And when I bake the cakes for class, I like to use a measuring scoop just to make sure that everything is nice and even and I don't have like uneven layers of cake. And then after I'm done filling up my cake pans, I like to give them a little tap on the table just to flatten everything out. And I like to do this just to make sure that the batter is evenly distributed in the pan and I don't have any burnt spots because one side has less batter than the other. And these are just some of the cakes that I made for class, and I'm just wrapping them up and putting them in the freezer. That way they're ready to go for that weekend. Next, I'm grabbing my cookies out from the freezer that I prepped yesterday, and I'm starting to put them in the freezer Ziploc bags. So this is the way I assemble them. I kind of like turn them sideways and then just kind of fit them all in one bag like that. Close them up, and then I like to date them. I don't like to use the cookies past like 2 months. It's not like they last that long anyways, but I don't like to do past 2 months just because I don't want to increase the risk of them getting like freezer burn. So next I'm just making some samples because the chocolate cupcakes that I made, I kind of overfilled them and obviously they don't look pretty. So I'm just gonna put these in little individual cupcake pans, or not pans, but containers, and I am just gonna frost them up and make samples out of them. So here I'm just making like a recess cupcake. So I put chocolate ganache on top of the chocolate cupcake, and then I'm also topping it with some recess or peanut butter frosting, and then cover them up, put them in a little bag, and then I can hand them out as samples. Because although they don't look that cute from the cupcake part, they are still super delicious. And instead of throwing them away, why not just hand them out as samples? Next, I'm going to be making a raspberry mascarpone cheesecake. So I don't know if you know this, but I just found out a year ago, crazy right, that you can actually bake a cheesecake in a silicone cake pan. Like, I didn't even ever think of that. But one time I had just had so many cheesecake orders. I think this was last year, and I didn't have any more 6-inch cake pans. So I decided to try it on a little silicone 6-inch pan, and it actually works really well. And I am a huge silicone pan advocate. I love baking in silicone everything. Cupcake pans, cake pans. I just love silicone just because it's a lot easier, one, to clean. And I also love just how everything bakes in silicone. It's less likely to burn and dry out, and I don't know, I just love it. See, even my dog cake pan is silicone. And there you go again, cupcake silicone pans. I'm telling you, they're the best. So whenever you're using cupcake liners, you always want to make sure that you buy some grease-proof cupcake liners. That way the outside doesn't show up like greasy, full of oil. And that way your cupcake liners are less likely to pull apart from your cupcake. I also like to use a medium ice cream scoop to measure out my cupcakes. That way they're all nice and even. Next, I'm just making some cupcakes for a new class that I'm going to put up on the schedule for the cake decorating studio. And these are going to be more like a spring type floral cupcake class. So we're using light yellow, a light purple, and some daisies and little stem accents, and they're just going to be so cute. So at the same time that I'm making these cupcakes, I do like to record a demo for the instructors that are going to be teaching that class that day. So a little tip when using piping bags and piping tips, you want to cut right above where the shape starts from the piping tip, and then you're going to push the piping tip up and then cut right where the piping shape starts, and then push your piping tip out again, and it should be perfect. So the bag shouldn't be obstructing the shape at all. Then you're going to fill your piping bag and you are ready to go. So a lot of people ask me about the little couplers that you usually see in cake decorating videos. Those are used more for when you're going to be using the same color but different piping tips. I personally don't like to use these just because whenever I'm using piping tips, usually they're different sizes. So I have like the smaller piping tips and then the bigger ones. So we can't switch out from small to big. So they're kind of useless for me. I don't use them at all. I would recommend using them only if you are using the same size piping tips. So once I finish decorating them, I just put them on a cake stand. That way I can set up my little background for my photo shoot and take pictures of my cupcakes. Then I put on a good TV show and started to prep my bows for our cake class that weekend. Then I started to laminate some piping decorating practice sheets for my class. So here I am just laminating all the sheets. These I actually do sell on the side. I sell them on Etsy, and then I also sell them in class. And so I'm just laminating them so it would be easier to have the students practice on them and they could just clean it off. If you are interested in purchasing one of these, I will leave the link below for the piping practice sheets. And you don't have to necessarily laminate these. You can literally just print it out and then put it in a sheet protector, or you can get a little acrylic sign holder. That way you could just practice and then wipe it off. Then on the next day, I started to finish up the cheesecake and the dog cake that I made the day before. So I just took the cheesecake out of the pan and then made a mascarpone whipped frosting and just put a little bit of raspberry jam in there and then kind of gave it a little swirl. Next, I'm decorating the doggy cake. So the frosting that I use is just made up of cream cheese and peanut butter. And then I just top it with a little bit more of the doggy treats that I get at a local doggy store or a pet store. And then I just top it off with some doggy safe fruits. So on this day I'm using raspberries. And then of course on the board I like to write happy birthday and then the dog's name. Next, I'm just making some Hello Kitty cupcake toppers for one of our Valentine classes. And then here I'm just preparing my cookie pans and I'm lining them with some parchment paper. Parchment paper is one of my favorite things to line my cookie sheets with rather than like silicone mats. Well, I like silicone mats too, but the parchment paper is just way easier to clean. I don't have to worry about washing the silicone mat because it's super annoying to wash because it gets really greasy. All I have to worry about is washing the cookie sheet and that's it. So I'm just lining up my cookie sheet with the cookies and I'm gonna let them thaw for an hour before I bake them. This is what I was talking about earlier when I like to place the marshmallow fluff right before I bake the cookies. And that is for my birthday cake cookies. And they are just so divine. So next we're making more vanilla cake for our cake decorating class, and we're also making a vanilla pecan cake for a client. So all the vanilla pecan cake is our signature vanilla cake batter with pecans added into it. So I just add some pecans to the cake pans and then I stir them up with a fork or a spoon. And this was my more efficient way to make two different types of cakes at once. And I also made some cupcakes with that same batter, just some regular vanilla cupcakes. And while I was doing that, my cookies were baking in the oven, and this is how the final look is for the cookies. I just use a circle cookie cutter and just kind of round out the edges, and this is how they look. They're crispy on the outside and so soft in the middle. So these cookies were made for a realtor. She wanted some logo cookies for one of her classes, so this is what we made for her. So first I bagged the cookies individually and then I close them up and I put the sticker or her logo sticker on the front and then our allergy information in the back, and then I seal them tightly to preserve freshness. So the next day is Saturday, which is class day. So I come in a couple of hours earlier just to make the buttercream, prep all the materials that we're gonna need for class, and just get the vibes going for the workshop. So this completes my week. Sundays I take off. I do a little bit of planning on Sundays, but for the most part, I do spend it with my family. And that wraps up this week. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.